fanatic red. We're just about sick and tired. In the South, we do things a little bit differently down here.
I know you do.
You know something, there's been some old boys go down there in Georgia that go on a ride, they take a trip, and they don't come back.
そして黒い猛牛です。ブラックジャック・マリガン。
Blackjack Mulligan. It's a name whispered with respect and a little fear. Why? Well, standing at 6 feet 9 inches and weighing nearly 300 pounds, Mulligan was an arrogant cowboy with a black hat, a leather glove, and a signature iron claw that left giants gasping for breath. He was big, he was mean, and he had stories that sounded too crazy to be true. From winning the World Tag Team Championship in 1975 to becoming one half of the iconic Blackjacks, this man ruled wrestling rings, but with his crazy highlights came insane controversies. Fan or not, I think you deserve to know this. One of the most shocking moments in Mulligan's life happened during a match in Boston in 1971. He was up against Pedro Morales, who was hugely popular, especially among the Latino community. Mulligan played the role of the villain perfectly, using dirty tricks to beat Morales down. The crowd was already fired up, but when Mulligan refused to end the match and kept attacking Morales, things got out of control. A fan in the audience, furious at what was happening, jumped over the guardrail and stabbed Mulligan in the leg. At first, a lot of people thought it was just part of the show, but when blood started pouring down Mulligan's leg, it became clear that this was real. The knife wound was serious, and doctors later said that the blade had missed a major artery by just millimeters. If it had cut any deeper, Mulligan could have bled to death right there in the ring. To make things worse, the attacker had dipped the knife in pig fat, which caused a severe infection. Mulligan needed over 100 stitches, and he was out of action for months while he recovered. The fan who attacked him was never arrested because security thought he was part of the show. After this incident, wrestling events in Boston changed their security policies, adding more barriers and checking fans for weapons before they entered the arena. All of this was too sad, but you can't really sympathize with him. Why? Well, here's the reason. Another one of the bigger scandals of Mulligan's life happened in 1989 when he and his son, Kendall Windham, got caught up in a counterfeiting scheme. They had somehow gotten involved in printing and selling fake $20 bills. They thought they were making a deal with buyers, but they were actually talking to undercover federal agents. When they showed up to complete the deal, they had suitcases filled with over $1 million in counterfeit cash. The authorities arrested them on the spot, and the case made headlines. Mulligan later admitted that this was one of the biggest mistakes of his life. He blamed financial troubles for his bad decision, saying that he was desperate for money and thought this was a way to fix his problems. He pleaded guilty in 1990 and was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. After serving his sentence, Mulligan tried to rebuild his life, but the scandal followed him for years. He later said that he felt ashamed for letting down his fans, his family, and himself. Even after retiring from wrestling, Mulligan's name came up in legal trouble again. In 2015, he was mentioned in a WWE lawsuit over concussion-related injuries. He had planned to sue the company, but WWE filed a lawsuit first, claiming that he had no case. The legal battle didn't go far, and the case was eventually dismissed in 2018, after Mulligan had passed away. It was a small footnote in his life compared to the other wild stories he was involved in, but it showed that his wrestling career had taken a toll on his health, like many other wrestlers from his era. As a former Marine and football player, Mulligan had a reputation for settling problems the old-fashioned way, with his fists. He didn't go looking for trouble, but if it found him, he never backed down. Over the years, some of his fights became just as famous as his matches.
Andre wasn't a real nice man. I mean, everybody thought Andre was a very nice guy. He wasn't a nice guy. He had a mean streak. And he was very arrogant. You got to remember something. I was the one that worked with Andre when they brought him over.
One of the wildest stories about Mulligan involved Andre the Giant. Now, Andre was one of the few men who actually made Mulligan look small. The two of them wrestled each other often, but outside the ring, they were usually friendly. One night, however, things took a turn. According to wrestler Manny Fernandez, the three of them were having drinks after a show playing a card game. Everything was fine until something set Mulligan off. Without warning, he reached across the table and punched Andre right in the face. The room went silent. Andre rubbed his chin, let out a deep chuckle, and said, "Oh, okay, boss. We fight now." And just like that, the two giants started swinging at each other, knocking over tables, chairs, and anything in their way. Some say the fight even spilled into Fernandez's apartment. When it was all over, there was no clear winner, but neither man backed down. Some people say Andre held a grudge after that, while others claim they laughed it off. Either way, it was one of the most famous fights in wrestling history. Another time, Mulligan had a run-in with Ole Anderson, a wrestler known for his short temper and sharp tongue. In the early 1990s, Mulligan was working behind the scenes in WCW when he overheard Ole bad-mouthing Eric Bischoff, who was quickly moving up in the company. Mulligan didn't like the way Ole was talking, so he stepped in and without hesitation, knocked him out cold with a single punch. Ric Flair, who was there at the time, said this wasn't the only time Mulligan put Ole in his place. Apparently, he had confronted him multiple times over the years, showing that even the toughest guys had to watch what they said around Mulligan. Since Ole wasn't exactly popular in the locker room, Mulligan's knockout punch was almost seen as something everyone had been waiting for. Then there was the time Mulligan went toe-to-toe with Harley Race, another legendary tough guy in wrestling. Harley was an 8-time NWA World Champion and had a reputation for never backing down from a fight. One night in the late 1970s, Mulligan and Harley got into an argument in a hotel room. Things got heated, and before anyone knew it, Mulligan threw a punch that sent Harley flying between two beds, getting him stuck between the mattresses and box springs. The two started wrestling on the floor, throwing punches and trying to overpower each other. Other wrestlers rushed in and managed to pull them apart, expecting round 2 to start at any moment. But surprisingly, Harley let it go. No one knows why, but maybe he figured Mulligan had earned his respect. Whatever the reason, the fight never continued, but it became one of the many legendary stories about Mulligan's toughness. These were just a few of the fights Mulligan got into over the years. Ric Flair once mentioned that Mulligan had punched Andre the Giant on another occasion as well, just to prove he wasn't afraid of anyone. There were also stories that he almost got into a fight with Lex Luger in the early 1990s because he didn't like Luger's attitude. But instead of throwing punches, Mulligan just walked away from his job before things got out of hand. Even though wrestling was full of tough men, Mulligan's fight stood out because of the size of his opponents and the way he handled himself. He wasn't just acting like a cowboy, he really was one. Back in Mulligan's day, wrestling was different. A lot of wrestlers had backgrounds in amateur wrestling, boxing, or even the military. Fights outside the ring weren't unusual, and many wrestlers saw them as a way to earn respect. Wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer once said that back then, if a wrestler got attacked by a fan, it was almost a compliment. It meant they were doing their job well as a bad guy. Mulligan fit right into that world. He was loyal to his friends, but if someone crossed him, he didn't hesitate to let them know. Despite all the controversy and trouble, Mulligan managed to turn things around later in life. In 2006, he and his former tag team partner, Blackjack Lanza, were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. It was a sign that the wrestling world had forgiven him for his past mistakes. He also wrote a book about his life called True Lies and Alibis in 2007, where he shared his experiences in wrestling and beyond. In 2012, he became an ordained minister, showing that he was looking for redemption in his later years. It seemed like he had finally found some peace after a life full of chaos. Sadly, our boy passed away in 2016. He will forever be missed for his entertainment and the substance he brought to the ring. As a tribute to his vivacious personality, here is a quick rundown of his epic career. Robert DeRoy Wyndham, better known as Blackjack Mulligan, was a man built for tough battles. Born on November 25, 1942, he had a strong, towering presence that made him stand out wherever he went. Before wrestling, he had dreams of making it big in football. He played at Texas Western College, now the University of Texas at El Paso, and even got a shot at the pros, trying out for teams like the New York Jets, New Orleans Saints, and Denver Broncos. But life had other plans. Before all that, he also served in the U.S. Marine Corps and spent time in Guam. When football didn't pan out, he found his way to wrestling, thanks to a push from his friend Wahoo McDaniel. Blackjack took the advice and started training. At first, he learned the ropes in Texas with Joe Blanchard and later polished his skills under Vern Gagne. Wrestling suited him. He was a big, tough cowboy, exactly the kind of guy who could put on a great show in the ring. In 1970, Blackjack packed his bags and headed to Japan for a wrestling tour. Teaming up with Larry Hennig, they won the IWA World Tag Team Championship, though they lost it a few weeks later. That didn't slow him down. A year later, he joined WWE, and that's when Blackjack Mulligan was born. He wore black trunks, a black hat, and a black glove, and he used his signature iron claw move to dominate his opponents. With the Grand Wizard as his manager, he quickly became a top contender. He even challenged champion Pedro Morales. But then, something crazy happened. One night in Boston, a fan attacked him with a knife, slashing his leg so badly he needed hundreds of stitches. Gorilla Monsoon caught the attacker, but the police thought it was all part of the act and let him go. Blackjack had to step away to heal, but he wasn't finished yet. Once he recovered, he teamed up with Blackjack Lanza to form the Blackjacks, a team that struck fear into their opponents. They won multiple tag team championships, including the WWF World Tag Team Championship in 1975. But Blackjack wasn't just a tag team guy. He made a name for himself as a singles competitor too. He won the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship and even teamed up with Ric Flair to win the NWA World Tag Team Championship. One of his biggest rivalries was with Andre the Giant. They fought all over the country in different wrestling promotions. When their feud reached the WWF in 1982, Blackjack admitted that Andre's strength was beyond anything he had ever faced. By 1984, he was back in the WWF full-time. He even had his own interview segment called Blackjack's Barbecue, a rival to Roddy Piper's famous Piper's Pit. In 1986, he wrestled under a mask as Big Machine, teaming up with Andre and Bill Eadie. Their team took on Bobby Heenan's wrestlers, and even guys like Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper briefly joined their side. After that storyline wrapped up, Blackjack continued wrestling under his own name until he left WWF in 1987. Even after leaving WWF, he didn't slow down. He fought in Texas, taking on tough guys like Bruiser Brody and the Von Erich family. In 1987, he returned to Florida to battle the Funk Brothers and teamed up with Kevin Sullivan. His last match happened on May 23, 1993, at WCW's Slamboree event. He teamed up with Wahoo McDaniel and Jim Brunzell against Don Morocco, Dick Murdoch, and Jimmy Snuka. The match ended without a winner, but by then, Blackjack's place in wrestling history was already secure. Outside the ring, Blackjack wasn't just a wrestler, he was a businessman too. He worked as a wrestling booker and promoter, even co-owning a wrestling company in Texas with Dick Murdoch after buying it from the Funk family. In 2006, he and Blackjack Lanza were honored with a spot in the WWE Hall of Fame, with their old manager Bobby Heenan giving a heartfelt speech about how much they had meant to the business. But Blackjack's life wasn't always smooth. In 1990, he and his son Kendall got caught up in some serious trouble. They were arrested for making fake $20 bills, and when the authorities investigated, they found nearly $500,000 in counterfeit money. Both of them took a plea deal and ended up serving 2 years in federal prison. In 2007, Blackjack wrote a book called True Lies and Alibis, where he shared wild stories from his life and career. Later in life, he found faith and became a born-again Christian. In 2012, he was ordained as a minister and spent his remaining years spreading his beliefs. In 2015, he got into a legal battle with WWE over the head injuries he had suffered during his career. He was part of a lawsuit with other former wrestlers, but the case was eventually dismissed in 2018, 2 years after his death. His final years were tough. In October 2015, he suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized. After months of health struggles, he passed away on April 7, 2016. He was laid to rest at the Florida National Cemetery. Blackjack Mulligan was more than just a wrestler. He was a fighter, a storyteller, and a legend. His towering presence and larger-than-life personality made him unforgettable. Even years after his passing, fans still remember him as one of the toughest, most charismatic wrestlers of his time. And that's the story of Blackjack Mulligan, one of the toughest, most controversial, and downright unforgettable figures in wrestling history. From his brutal matches and wild backstage fights to his legal troubles and eventual redemption, his life was nothing short of legendary. Whether you saw him as a hero or a villain, there's no denying that Mulligan left a lasting mark on professional wrestling. His legacy lives on through his family, his stories, and the impact he had on the sport. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible wrestling stories from the past. Got a favorite Mulligan moment? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.